Hi, my name is Caitlin Olet, and I did my thesis on explicit content vocabulary instruction. My research questions were, to what extent will implementing 10 minutes of daily explicit content vocabulary instruction for 10 weeks improve ninth grade students' enduring issue essay scores by at least 10% compared to their baseline scores? Does stamina increase with the students' increased content vocabulary knowledge? Does student confidence in content vocabulary impact their scores? And lastly, will there be a noticeable increase for any one student population, meaning students with a disability, English language learners, or general education students? So the problem that I had been seeing in my classroom was that students were struggling to use the vocabulary that they were being taught and implement it and use it in their enduring issue essay scores, especially during their cumulative assessments, which are mock regencies that we hold every 2 to 3 months. The reason why I wanted to use explicit instruction is because it's a strategy proven to help students with a disability. So I thought it could be implemented for all of my student populations to see an increase in their vocabulary usage. The way explicit instruction works is that material gets chunked into more manageable pieces for a student to digest and learn from. The teacher provides model instruction, followed by guided practice, and then eventually they're able to implement independent practice so the student can show off the skills that they have learned throughout the week. I implemented this research in my own classroom. I teach Global 9 in the Bronx. I have about 110 Global 9 students who range from 14 to 15 years old. Of that 110 students, 89 participated because some students were absent during the pretest and some students were absent during the post-test. There are 55 general education students, 14 English language learners, and 20 students with a disability. As per the literature review findings, all of the studies that I had looked into had proven that it worked in some way or another, but it proved that it worked even more so within schools that implemented explicit instruction for longer than 5 minutes and daily. So as long as these schools were following longer than 5 minutes and daily instruction, they saw growth within their students' vocabulary usage and usage in their essays, and an increase in their understanding. So explicit instruction had been created after big DI or big direct instruction and little direct instruction. It kind of stems off in branches and takes ideas from direct instruction and direct instruction, but big DI is a more structured method, whereas little DI or small DI tends to be more loose, and educators are able to maneuver it with whatever fits their needs of their students. For explicit instruction, your first step is breaking down ideas and modeling for the students, followed by guided practice, as well as independent practice so students can show off their skills. As long as it was followed in that order for, again, at least 5 minutes of daily explicit instruction, educators did see a growth in mastered materials and in vocabulary usage for their students. The way that this was implemented in this research was a pretest was given, again, a mock regents or the cumulative assessment, where students had 15 multiple choice questions, 5 documents that students needed to analyze and annotate, as well as an enduring issue essay. In the first few days of every week, students were given new vocabulary terms and modeled instruction. One of the key strategies that we used was morphology, where we break down the word into smaller, more manageable chunks, try to figure out their definitions, and then combine those definitions to make a big definition for the entire word. So there's an example there of acropolis. Students were able to break down the word acropolis into a prefix and suffix of acro and polis and try to figure out those words. For acro, students connected them to acrobatics. So they talked about how it was top and high, whereas polis they had learned from a previous worksheet, meaning city-state. So the definition they were able to come up with was a high city or a city on top of a hill. Students had used morphology before, so this wasn't the first time they were ever seeing it when we started this research. They had used it during their second unit of ancient history in the Paleolithic era and the Neolithic era, where we had broken down that word for them and had them guess as to what those sections of the word mean. Next, we worked on guided practice, where students use passages and documents with the teacher, breaking down their understanding, trying to find new vocabulary terms, as well as the vocabulary terms that they used in the first few days. After they were given guided practice, it followed by independent practice. Again, same thing with documents, passages, and inserting practice paragraphs. Throughout the week, students used a bunch of different models, one including the Freyer model, which is pictured here, where the student writes down the term, its definition, characteristics, examples, and even non-examples. We also did a version of it where it was the term, the definition given to them, and then they had to find their own definition and then write a picture, as well as the term, the definition, and examples. We also use vocabulary Pictionary, where students had to draw on the board the word that they had, and their teammates had to guess what that term they were drawing was, as well as guess the word, which the teacher would provide a definition and they had to guess the term. And one of my favorites, word sneak, where students sat and had conversations with other students and would try to sneak vocabulary words into their conversation. Students also worked on short stories, whether it be a day in the life stories, or even trying to continue a story they had read, especially with mythology. And lastly, that paragraph usage, where students would practice writing their enduring issue paragraphs with everything they needed. So this way, when it came time to actually write whole essays, it became a lot easier. During each week, students would be given these exit tickets, asking them to describe on a scale of 1 to 10 how confident they were in using the vocabulary terms from today's lesson. You could see the growth in the first few weeks compared to the last few weeks. So in the first week, students weren't really confident, but as time went on, you saw their confidence increase from those 1s and 2s up to those 4s and 5s, showing that they felt really comfortable seeing new words and trying to figure out what they meant and trying to use them. We also had group discussions where I pulled students and just asked them how they were doing and answering any misconceptions that they had or any points of struggle for them. Moving to the findings and limitations, 61.8 of students did increase by 10% on their enduring issue essay scores, so more than half did actually end up increasing due to the explicit instruction. And there were noticeable increases for general education students, as we see in this pie chart, and English language learners, as we see in this pie chart. 50 or more % of students, of general education students and English language learners, did increase, but only 35% of special education students increased, which was surprising because explicit instruction is a strategy that we use with students with a disability. Based on their group discussions, as well as the exit tickets, and just anecdotals from day after day, students said that their confidence did increase. Even during their classwork, students were more confident in seeing new terms and trying to break them down. As well as in their paragraph usage, students were able to use those vocabulary words that they had learned throughout the few weeks and implement them and actually use them as their outside information and to describe their pieces of evidence rather than just quoting straight out of the document. Some of the limitations are it is a small sample size, although 89 students is a good chunk of students in one school, it doesn't translate as well to some bigger schools. We are obviously based in New York because we're in the Bronx, so curriculum can differ and that could have an impact on whether this explicit content vocabulary instruction works in the way that we used it. Students were also aware that they were in this study. If this study is to be redone in a different school, in a different setting, there might be different findings. And lastly, the continuation of learning. In terms of professional learning, my principal actually let me conduct a professional development on explicit instruction, what I was doing in my classroom and how to implement it in other teachers' classrooms, which was really cool because other teachers had shown interest in using it in their classrooms. All periods of my Global 9 classes will continue to use vocabulary instruction as it proves to work for students who are English language learners as well as general education students. But to continue to foster learning with our students with disabilities, I would like to implement some more strategies and some more tools so implementing a word wall, analysis stations, anchor charts, and Socratic seminars could help them increase their content vocabulary knowledge as well as their ability to actually implement it in their enduring issue essays. And lastly, I would like to implement this with the ELA teacher. Interdisciplinary learning has been proven to work. So if we can get this across all subjects, we should be able to see an increase in our students with disabilities. Some of the things I talked to the ELA teacher about was creating common vocabulary words that we could teach them together so that they can use it in both classes and hopefully grow students' usage and understanding of those terms. Lastly, I also talked to the ELA teacher about creating graphic organizers for argumentative essays that are basic and not so content specific. That way they can use it throughout their time in our school and throughout each class. So an enduring issue essay is similar to an argumentative essay where you're trying to prove that you are correct. So having a graphic organizer that is used in multiple classrooms across multiple years could help them increase their enduring issue score. And with all of these tools, hopefully students with disabilities will be able to catch up to their counterparts of English language learners as well as their general education students, if not surpass them. Hopefully, with the school-wide implementation of explicit instruction, as well as the collaboration between all subject areas, we'll be able to support our students even more. Thank you.